Hey guys, back again with some modern magic, and we're going to be playing on a budget still. This time around, we're going to be talking about mill. And now, mill is a very dangerous strategy to be playing right now with all of the arrows laying around and all the lures laying around. But if you like to live on the edge, this deck is for you. And this is a very, it's kind of a goofy deck because you don't counter their spells, you don't make them discard it, you just get rid of their stuff before it even enters, before they draw it, before anything. So the way that we're going to be winning, obviously, is milling. So we're going to be trying to make sure that our opponent gets to 0 cards in their deck. Now, Hedron Crab says whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, target player mills 3. And then Rune Crab says whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent mills 3. And then Jace's Phantasm says Jace's Phantasm gets +4/+4 as long as an opponent has 10 or more cards in their graveyard. Now that's going to be easy to hit because our opponent's already going to be playing fetch lands and everything, but also of how much we're milling. Now, I'm going to say that definitely the most expensive card in our deck is Mesmeric Orb as a 4 of, but it says whenever a permanent becomes untapped, that permanent's controller mills a card. That is very powerful because we don't even have to play anything. We can just say we can get to a stalemate portion of our game, and then if our opponent does anything, they're going to mill out. Next up is Ashiok, which is going to help us against those graveyard decks, but is also going to further a plan to mill. So it says spells and abilities your opponent's control can't cause their controllers to search their library. This counters fetch lands as well as Titan. So if you have problems with Primordial Titan, this deck has 4 Ashioks in the main deck. And then -1, target player mills 4, and then each opponent is going to end up exiling the graveyard. So you could even mill yourself if you wanted to, and then end up exiling the graveyard, but your plan here is to mill them. Tome Scour, 1 mana, target player mills 5. 2 mana, Frantic Inventory, draw a card, then draw cards equal to the number of frantic inventories in your graveyard. It's going to be an extra way for us to draw cards in this deck, and it's just once you have the cards in your hand, it's like, okay, mill, but then you're suddenly out of cards. And unlike Burn, which has the same problem, we're in blue. So without having to have any fancy lands, or fancy really just cards, we can just draw cards. So this is going to scale up with how much we're drawing each turn, and it's going to give us a lot more fuel. Next up is Madding Cacophony, which is a 2-drop with kicker, and as a sorcery, each opponent mills 8 cards. If this spell was kicked, instead each opponent mills half their library rounded up. You're usually not going to kick this because we have 21 lands, but it can be kind of big to kicker it. It's just more often than not that 8 cards is going to be enough. So this is going to be 2 mana, mill 8. And we're trying to beat 60 cards, 7 of which are drawn at the start of the game, and then each turn they're going to draw, assuming they only draw 1 a turn. So getting to 0 cards in their deck is actually a lot faster than it seems. Next up is Mana Leak as a 3 of in here. It's a bit of counter magic because we are trying to mill them, but there are going to be times where they just have things that we need to deal with, we need to respond to. So Mana Leak is going to give us an opportunity to deal with what they have. Mind Sculpt says 2 mana, target player puts the top 7 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. So it's going to be 2 mana, mill 7. And so it's going to be just like Madding Cacophony, but 1 fewer card, and also doesn't have kicker. And so these 2 cards combined are going to be a ton of mill, combined with Tome Scour, and then each time we play a land, But really, it's in there just as a way for us to just get their deck to 0 cards as fast as possible. Next up is Mind Funeral, which says 3 mana, target opponent reveals cards from the top of his or her library until 4 land cards are revealed. And real quick, as a side note, there are a lot of decks that run like 18 lands right now. And so for a deck that runs 18 lands, that's probably going to be easily like half their deck, if not more. And then it says that player puts all the cards revealed this way into his or her graveyard. So they flip over that many cards, probably like half their deck at that point, unless you get really unlucky, and they mill it. Now that's going to be very, very good because it's 3 mana and it's going to deal with basically their entire deck. Next, I already described Mesmeric Orb. It's just a way to get extra value. It will affect us as well, though, so keep that in mind. Next up, I want to talk a bit about our mana base, because we have 4 Evolving Wilds, and we're we're not a mono blue deck. I actually, forgive me, my Mind Funeral here is the only black card, and it is that good that you do want to have those swamps, and so 4 swamps will easily be enough with your Evolving Wilds and your Field of Ruins. So really, that's all you need. I completely skipped over that it was a black card, and I didn't have the mana for it, but that is all you need for the deck. And so if you have Evolving Wilds, it triggers your Hedron Crab and your Ruin Crab, so it'll get those extra triggers. And if you have Field of Ruin, that's going to allow you to also search for your black land as well as Evolving Wilds, but it's also going to give you a way to deal with pesky lands and get extra triggers on your crabs. Anyway, that's it for the main deck. Really, you're just trying to get them from 60 cards to 0 cards as soon as possible. The sideboard is filled with Soul Guide Lantern as a way to deal with graveyard hate. Cerulean Drake for a way to deal with burn and other red decks. Damping Sphere to deal with Tron and Storm and sometimes burn. Dismember to deal with pesky creatures that you just really need to deal with. And then Mystical Dispute to deal with combo decks and control. And it's also, usually you're probably going to slot this in for probably going to be the, in a control matchup, probably going to end up being the, probably the Frantic Inventories, because even though you want those, that card draw, you might just need to keep the density of mill spells, and you need to be able to cast things to counter your opponent's stuff, and you might just need more than Mana Leak. Anyway, so that's the list. It's pretty sweet and it's really cheap, and your opponent's gonna see the crabs and it's immediately gonna know what's happening. But the Jason's Phantasms can become 5/5 flyers, and sometimes the game will end before they even mill out. Sometimes they'll be so focused on trying to deal with your mill that they won't be able to deal with your 5/5 flyer. Anyway, the only thing that you have to be careful about in this, though, is that Ashiok kind of is bad with Jace's Phantasm, but quite often Jace's Phantasm is just a really good card and will last longer than Ashiok. So eventually, though their cards will be exiled, eventually they'll fill back up. Anyway, that's the deck, and I hope you enjoyed watching it, and I'm really enjoying these budget decks. It's really fun to test them out. It's really fun to play them. I really like this deck because it's one of the first decks I actually played in Standard a while back. It's not this exact list, obviously, but it's a really fun deck, and people will hate you for it. So with that, I will see you next time.